Hey everyone, my name's Aaron, and I'm a Splunk Cloud Architect and also the co-author of the SCMA application. Today we're going to walk through how to get started with the application, the instructions, and how to interpret your results. Getting started, it's really easy. Just download the application from Splunk Base and install on your Splunk monitoring console. Once installed, it does not require a restart and will come right to the instructions tab and understand how to get started. Now, one thing to note is when we install this, for customers that have multiple Splunk deployments, you're going to want to make sure that it can see all those deployments from your monitoring console. If it can't, be sure to install it on each individual island of your Splunk deployment to get an accurate picture if you're consolidating environments in the Splunk Cloud. When we get started, you'll see a few checks below. These checks really ensure that we have access to all the data sources we care about throughout the assessment to make sure we get an accurate representation of your Splunk deployment. You want to ensure that the number of instances is relatively close to what you have deployed, and follow the message to the right to just ensuring you have the right number of instances and either the KV store is ready to go and you're using the latest version of the application. If we scroll down below, you also see we have an optional update button here, and what this button will do is it'll grab the latest version of all the Splunk-based applications, and this is helpful to compare your applications that you've installed and comparing it to understand if it's compatible for Splunk-based. Now, if you don't have access to Splunk Cloud or Splunk Base from your deployment here, or access to the internet, we by default ship the latest versions of the applications on Splunk Base every time the SCMA application is published to Splunk Base. If we scroll down, you'll see we have numbers here that indicate the order. So we'll go ahead and override the option if you want for a customer name. In my scenario, my customer name is Aaron's Lab. We'll scroll down and select the current entitlement that you have. So this is the license volume of what you're currently entitled to for your current deployment. So if you currently own, say, a 1 terabyte Splunk core license, go ahead and select 1 terabyte. And similarly, if you're entitled to 900 gigabytes of enterprise security, go ahead and select that. If we go ahead and scroll down, you can see the different options of where you can install and run Splunk Cloud. In this case, we can leave the core deployment, or if you have a requirement to run either PCI, HIPAA, or even FedRAMP, you can select those as well. If you have a requirement for encryption at rest, or if you want to run an AWS or GCP, you can select that as well. If we scroll down, you'll see the different components and what's supported for the current regions. In this case, AWS, you see everything's available. And if you look to the right, we also see the different regions and zones where we can host Splunk Cloud. Now that's it for the initial setup. If we come over here and scroll down to step number 4, you'll see our next step is to jump over to the checks tab. And right now in the SCMA, we have approximately 58 checks, and these checks vary from reviewing the Splunk Cloud sweet spot to professional services. So you'll see that we populate both of these, and to go ahead and just hit start. And while these checks are running, it's really important to note that these checks run independently. They only run at a time and execute serially, so you don't have to worry about additional load on top of your Splunk environment. Now, it may take a few minutes to run in your Splunk environment. In my case, I have a very small lab, so it'll return very quickly. But if you scroll down, you'll see that you can interact with these. So if you see, well, I want to see what real-time searches I have, you can easily expand this out, and you'll be able to see the description of the check, some of the message, and the suggested action, as well as the result. Now, these are really just a guidance of what we look for in migrating to customers inside of Splunk Cloud, and they aren't necessarily showstoppers. If you do see errors or warnings, the messages are very descriptive and can suggest a suggested action moving forward. And we do strongly suggest that if you do have errors in the environment, it's really a good conversation piece to have with your Splunk sales rep and Splunk sales engineer, just to make sure that we validate all your requirements prior to moving you into Splunk Cloud to ensure your success. So it looks like we're almost done here, about 82%. Once this completes, we'll see a big green banner that says so, and we'll be able to see all the results. So we'll give it a couple more seconds here while it completes, and we'll move on to the next tab of the application. Okay, we're all done. So that's all set, and here you can see we had 57 checks, 11 warnings, no errors, and below too you can see the results. So we can easily click this banner, jump to the next tab, and we'll be able to do a little bit more of a thorough review. So on the check results tab, we'll see our license consumption just for trending. In our case, we selected 1 terabyte because that's what we own. I don't have a terabyte coming into my lab environment, so there isn't going to be much deploying here. To the right, we're going to see the details that we selected. So we see our customer name of Aaron's Lab, a terabyte for core, about 900 gigs for yes. It doesn't qualify for an SVC customer in this case, and we see our utilization for SVC as well if we did want to consider doing a workload pricing option inside of Splunk Cloud. If we scroll below too, we also see the results in a little bit more detail. We can filter out by category, check name, status, what have you. But the really neat feature of this functionality is we can just expand this if we wanted to get more details and look at the results later. Now, while the SCMA app is really good for determining your fit for Splunk Cloud, it also gives the customer a feel for areas that they might want to improve on in their environment just to make sure that they can run more optimally. And this is true because it's looking at how you fit for cloud, but also areas that if you clean up, you'll be able to get better performance inside of your environment and just adhere to Splunk best practices. So once we've reviewed the check result review and determined we're good to go to the next step, we can go ahead and click the Professional Services tab, or we can scroll to the bottom here and follow the flow of the buttons throughout the application. The Professional Services Scoping tab is really helpful when determining the level of effort to move you into Splunk Cloud with a professional services organization. Now, this dashboard will be ran either by the sales engineer or your professional service engagement manager at Splunk to ensure we capture your requirements for moving in the cloud. So right here we can determine if we need to migrate your data into Splunk Cloud. So in my case, I would like my data moved from on-prem into Splunk Cloud. I don't have any other environments to consolidate, so I'll hit no. I don't have any capacity constraints in my network. And if I were interested in some of the other professional services offerings, like Cloud Enterprise Security Success, we'll go ahead and select that as well. And I want to get this done relatively quickly, say in February 2021. Now we can continue down. We're going to look at the current architecture topology. And this is a really good way of just ensuring we can capture what your current deployment on-prem looks like. So if you were a single Splunk deployment, you could select this, or if you were a distributed environment, you can go ahead and click the D. And you'll notice this is also following the SVA, or Splunk Validated Architectures, and you can read more about it here on this link. So we've selected distributed SVA category. Let's say we're doing multiple search heads. So we see we're at D2, and then right here we see our architecture diagram, and we can easily select that to open up in a new tab to review the diagram. If we scroll below, we just see a selection of everything that we've picked so far. And below, you'll also see a recommended services package. Now, this package really suggests the base package of moving you into Splunk Cloud. So this is taking your content, lifting and shifting it from on-prem and putting it in the cloud. If there are additional packages that you would like to purchase, you can engage your Splunk PS Engagement Manager and account team to add those on as well. So below, you'll see some of the PS checks related to core, the applications that we need to vet, any data to migrate, and the blue is the calculated value throughout the checks that we ran on the second tab, and the green is really the highlighted values relating to what PS package it suggests. So in this case, we fall into a few categories, but there are a few where we fall in the standard. So by default, we default to saying that the best package for your success is really the standard package. So moving on, we'll go ahead and go to the license planning dashboard. And this license planning dashboard accounts for how you want to grow with Splunk Cloud. So right away, we can select the desired term of your contract. And by no means is this binding. It really just determines how you plan on using your cloud purchase and will allow your Splunk sales rep to come up with a quote for you later down the line. So in my case, I want to have Splunk Cloud subscription for 3 years. I'll have a cloud stack name of Aaron's Lab. Again, just validating where we want to run Splunk Cloud, so AWS. Core environment, no EAR, but say I want to run in USD, so I'll go ahead and click Virginia. I don't know UBA, so I won't select that. Now, if I come down below, I can go ahead and update these values. So say I was a terabyte initially, but I want to jump up to 2 terabytes because I really want to go all in with Splunk. We can select that value, and accordingly, we want to increase our enterprise security purchase. And then for term 2, we can increase it as well. So say we want to ramp up to about 2.5 terabytes in year 2, add an additional capacity for enterprise security. And then finally for year 3, we wanted to go to about 4 terabytes inside of Splunk and also ramp up our enterprise security. So what you'll also see is the concept of SVCs, or Splunk Virtual Compute. And we're a great candidate for that because we're doing over 2 terabytes of ingestion. Now, this is a new licensing model at Splunk, and I suggest you reach out to your Splunk account team to learn more. we do have the option here to show the additional packages, and this helps understand the different packages that we've selected below. So if you look at these available packages and the different ingest tranches here, we can see an ingest range of 2 to 6 terabytes. We have different utilization ranges, and these utilization ranges are already calculated for you based on the checks that we've ran previously. So we have a premium application, and we by default go to 650 SVCs because in year 1 we're about 2 terabytes, and year 2 and 3 we're also about 650 because we can accommodate that 2 to 6 terabyte range. And this is really great for customers because in workload pricing, we don't meter you by ingest. It's strictly based on the amount of resources that you use. So if you are a very efficient shop, then you can optimize your searches and really reduce the resource consumption in your environment. It really allows you to extend and get a lot more value out of your Splunk cloud purchase. So if we scroll down below, we can also see kind of how we've broken it out by terms 1 through 3, as well as our growth and adoption for Splunk in the later years. Now the next step is to look at our storage capacity and what we want to purchase for Splunk Cloud. And we suggest you're a workload candidate right here, and you can see the selections that we've made in the previous dashboards persist and carry through just to give us more context. Now in Splunk Cloud, we have 2 different options. There's the active searchable and active archive, and we explain the differences here and also give you a calculation on how we figure the number of storage blocks needed to purchase inside of Splunk Cloud. So by default, workload pricing does not include any storage by default. So we include here, based on the checks we've ran previously, about the average, the max, and the mode of your retention periods for Splunk Cloud. So this allows you to have a conversation with your account team or even walk through this yourself to understand how you want to model your data retention in your Splunk Cloud investment. So really quickly, we can change these sliders and say, well, I want to have about 24 months an active searchable. And if I want to increase this, I can maybe go to 60 months for active archive and have a total retention period of about 7 years. Now, if we scroll down below, we'll also see a trend over time. The red line here is looking at the license over the terms. So we see our ramp from 2 to our 4 terabytes as well. And you see the amount of storage needed to purchase for both DDAA and DDAS as well. Finally, below, you'll also notice the blocks of storage need to be purchased per archive type and broken out by your term as well. Now, before we export the data and send it back to Splunk to help with modeling for Splunk Cloud, I wanted to show you 2 other features that we've added inside the SCMA that are really helpful for customers. Now, if we go to this Tools dashboard and go to Data Egress Calculator, we've added in data egress as well as forward topology sizing. And these 2 dashboards really help ensure customers understand their Splunk Cloud deployment and ensure they're ready to migrate to Splunk Cloud. So this data egress calculator is really helpful for customers who are very bandwidth conscious and moving data into the cloud environment. So we give a brief instruction above that explains the different options between a universal and heavy forwarder and where they come into play. You see we carry through our 2 terabytes for our first term, and we default to a universal forwarder, but you can also select a heavy forwarder as well. Now what we do is we show the different compression ratios between a universal forwarder and a heavy forwarder. So by default, a universal forwarder generally does about a 1 to 10 compression, whereas a heavy forwarder really does a 1 to 2 compression. Now, a universal forwarder is really our preferred method moving into Splunk Cloud, but there often are times a heavy forwarder is necessary to do filtering or specific routing of data. Generally, the best practice is to leverage universal forwarder, and you can read up more on this link above on UFs or heavy forwarders. That is the question. Now, below 2, we're starting to look at modeling of your data transfer over time, and this is really good to give back to your network admins who want to ensure that they're not going to overconsume the pipe moving that data in the cloud. So we have a couple different ways to slice this data. We can look at the peak business hours of just a simple model of 8 to 6, and what you can see is what your bandwidth through, so megabits per second right here based on that 2 terabytes, and you can see that running total of data transferred inside of your environment that is compressed. You can also see this broken out over here as well, where we're doing 2 terabytes. We have a 1 to 10 compression ratio with that universal forwarder. We're really transferring 200 gigabytes over the wire because of that 1 to 10 compression ratio, and an average megabits per second of about 18.9. Now, many customers might not fall into this typical business hours. So part of the checks that we've ran previously calculate how much data is being moved as a percentage in your environment, and we can see my lab environment really processes most of the data around midnight, and we have a big spike there, but it's pretty consistent throughout below. If we scroll down too, we have also a TCO calculations that show your data egress costs from moving data from other cloud providers like AWS or GCP inside of Splunk Cloud. You can reference our calculators here, and below you can also model what this would look like moving data in. So of our 2 terabyte ingestion, we can say of that 10% maybe AWS, 20% maybe GCP, and we'll leave 0 for Azure and 0 for other. So we see about 200 gigabytes per day for AWS, 400 for GCP. We can leave it at default provider costs, but we can also look at what this compression ratio would be for the different forwarder options we have here. So again, a universal forwarder, really that 10:1 compression ratio, or a heavy forwarder as well as HEC. And this allows you to model out really what the data transfer costs will be for moving to cloud. So of this 200 gigabytes and 400 gigabytes below, you can see what the cost is per AWS and GCP per month as well as per year, and we can see that comparison below. Now, if you say that you have a negotiated rate with the different cloud providers, you can easily override this. So if you say, well, my true data transmission cost is only $0.01, we can see that here and model it appropriately. Now moving forward, we can go back to that other dashboard I mentioned. We'll go to forwarder topology sizing. Now this dashboard is great to ensure that you have the right forwarder topology to ensure that you can send data in the cloud. And it also helps to make sure that you're ready to go when professional services shows up to do the work. Now in cloud, there are 2 different options for sending data. There's direct or the use of intermediate forwarders. We explain these options here as well. So we can come and select our volume. We can look at our routing options if we have AWS or GCP sources, as well as if we decided to use a universal heavy forwarder, and what type of CPU architecture we have available to us. So in our case, if we have 2 terabytes, we have universal forwarder, and we might have 12 CPU forwarders available to us. We can now calculate and model this and say, well, we can increase that to 4 pipeline sets, and now we can see roughly how many universal forwarders we need here. So for a universal forwarder to do about 2 terabytes a day, we need about 4 pipelines per forwarder, and we can do 2 forwarders with this setting right here to enable 4 parallel ingestion pipelines. Now below as well, we give you a diagram as a nice leave behind to show what it looks like. You can easily click on this to expand it. And below too, we give a version compatibility matrix with Splunk Cloud and your universal forwarders. Now let's jump back to that data export. This data export is a great way to share the results with Splunk and to ensure that we're appropriately sizing your Splunk Cloud stack. You can review the results here before you ship the data, and we do not send any PII or any sensitive information regarding host names, usernames, or IP addresses. And to ensure that we're not doing that, you can easily click on these links to see what the data looks like when it's exported. So we can easily click this and agree to the terms. And there are 2 options here. One is a full output, and one is a professional services output that can be shared with the PS teams. So in our case, let's go ahead and download both. We'll see if it download there, and we'll also download this. All right, great, looks like it completed, and you can see we have the zip here as well as the document there as well. Now when you're all done, you can easily come to the Splunk support portal, and this is the way that we suggest sending it over via a support ticket. So if you come and log into your support portal inside of Splunk, go ahead and hit upload files. And when you select upload files, you'll see an option for purpose. Just do cloud assessment, submit, and upload the file that was exported from the SCMA, and this will be shared with your Splunk account team. I hope this was helpful. Thank you very much for joining today, and please reach out if you have any questions.